All right, recapping from the top, we always want to read the whole sentence. Mititera Deus coloquendicaus agaius arpaneus, eques Romanus, familiaris quintituri, et quintus unius ex Hispania quidam. And as we do that, we are looking for things that stand out to us that we could maybe bracket off, and then solid punctuation like a semicolon there. We also notice other interesting things as we go through this, right? Like we should be able to pick out a coloquendi causa, a nice little genitive gerund with a causa expressing purpose. Simple little phrases like ad eos, right? Or ex Hispania should be very, very easy chunks. But most of all, we're looking for our verbs and our subjects. And then anything that maybe describes that subject, like eques Romanus. Whenever we have a genitive, we always attach it to whatever noun it's closest to, and that noun happens to be familiaris, also nominative, also describing our subject, right? And then our little of. And then we also have and another subject, and he's described by the word quidam. So our main sentence is just Gaius Arpaneus and Quintus Unius is sent, right? Or Gaius Arpaneus is sent, and a certain Quintus Unius also is sent, right? And we can fill in those other details for the sake of coloquendying. He is sent to them for the sake of coloquendying them. And we talked about the word, when we rename our subject, when we give it another noun that tells us what they are specifically, we call that an appositive, and it has to be in the same case, and it's usually offset by commas. Gaius Arpaneus has two appositives, eques Romanus and familiaris quintituri. And Quintus Unius doesn't get an appositive, but he gets some extra information that he is ex Hispania and that he is a certain Quintus Unius. And then within things like our relative clause, we're also going to look for a subject and a verb, and that verb happens to take an infinitive, had been accustomed to ventitare, and then other, little chunks that are very easy. To ventitare, to ambiorigam, like already, before the ablative here, and then a genitive gets attached to the noun closest to it. So ante misu Caesaris is a prepositional phrase, and ad ambiorigam is a prepositional phrase, but I would definitely put the ad ambiorigam with the ventitare. And then apud quos introduces another relative clause. Typically they start with the qui quae quod form, but when we have a preposition in front of it, like apud, and that's part of our relative clause, and then goes through a verb and another solid punctuation, right? But within it, we've got our little chunk, apud quos, but we're still looking for things like the subject of our relative clause and the verb. And then we have another little prepositional phrase, lots of prepositional phrases in this paragraph. Lots of prepositional phrases, but apud quos, ambiorix, locutus est, ad hunc modum, which we translated as in this way. And it introduces for us that the rest of this paragraph is largely going to be in an indirect statement, since it's not quoted. And then any sort of subordinate clauses within our indirect statement are probably going to be subjunctive, right? So we're looking for accusatives and infinitives, and then subordinate clauses with subjunctives. Again, we're going to read the whole sentence and look for a solid punctuation. Se pro Caesaris in se beneficiis pluram mei confitere debere, quod eos opera stipendio liberatus est, quod adjuvatigis finitimi suis pendere consu esset, quod quae ia filius et fratres filius ab Caesare remissi essent, quos, all the way through there, right? And that's a solid punctuation at tenuissent. So what I noticed as I went through here was several either because, right, or which, right? We're either dealing with a because clause or a relative clause, but I'm going to mark them all off. So that's its own clause, right? And quod either means because or which. Got another one, because or which, and then another one, because or which. This last one, that's definitely a which, right? Or a whom, since it's masculine. And going through the tenuissent. So the main clause in this sentence was just the beginning part. And again, I'm looking for the main parts of my sentences to be accusatives and infinitives because we're in a big indirect statement. And whenever I have a say, right, that's going to be the accusative in my indirect statement, that he, like himself, but that he, blah, blah, blah. We actually have two infinitives here, and when we have two and there's no and, one must explain the other. We decided that confiteri is better to explain debere, though you could do it either way. It's just a little bit neater if he confesses, right? That he confesses, and then setting you up for like another indirect statement that he owes, right? That he owes what? He owes a direct object, plurimum, and then we've got a dative. He owes it to hei in exchange for, which takes, and it's a nice little prepositional phrase, right? But pro takes the ablative. So pro goes with beneficiis in exchange for the kindnesses in se towards him. And Caesaris is genitive, so we're going to put it with that noun, beneficiis, right? Caesar's kindnesses in exchange for or in return for the kindnesses of Caesar towards him. And then since we didn't have a singular neuter, not really, this quote probably means because eius is genitive, so we're going to throw it with the noun next to it, which could be my nominative subject. Stipendio is definitely ablative. My verb is liberatus esset, meaning opera can't be the subject of a masculine liberatus esset, so it must be opera. Because at his opera, or because of his opera, or by his opera, he had been liberatus from the ablative. And that's neuter, so this quote makes sense to be which, probably dative, a positive describing my probably dative, infinitive, and then a verb that explains that infinitive, right? So that's my verb, it's also my subject, and it goes with pendere, right? And quod is my direct object, which he had been consuesseted to pendere to the dative. Quodque, again, this could be because or which. We're going to keep translating to figure out which one makes the most sense. Filius, et filius, et fratris filius must be my subject. Of course, fratris genitive, so I'm attaching it to filius. We've got an ab caesare, so we probably need a passive verb, and there it is, right? His filius and the filius of his fratris had been remissed. That explains my dative here. To him, ab caesare. And so probably dealing with a because for this one, right? So we had a because and then a which, and now a because again, right? But specifically a and because. And then it's two aes for us, right? We gotta recognize those aes. And then this one is definitely a whom, referring back to my plural, filius et fratris filius, whom makes it my object. Adjuvatiki must be my subject. Obsidum's genitive, so I'm going to pair it with the noun next to it. And quos actually is the only thing that missos could be describing, making it probably a participial phrase. I'm not going to put the subject in the participial phrase, but I am going to otherwise put the participle and everything between it and the noun or pronoun it describes, except for the subject, inside of that participial phrase. So like having been sent, this must be in the number of obsides. So whom, having been sent in the number of obsides, the subject, the adjuvatiki, had verbed, right, had tenuiscented. The adjuvatiki had tenuiscented whom, op would say, right? Op would plus the accusative in plus the ablative, ser would sutse et catenis. Neque, and not that which, again, I'm always going to read the whole thing, fecere deo pugnatione castrorum, audicio voluntate sua fecisse. And it looks like that's an infinitive all by itself, so that's probably the infinitive in, my next main clause, the next part of my indirect statement. Just like my say confiteri debere, I've got a neque fecisse. Id could be the subject of that fecisse. Could be accusative for it to go with my infinitive, but it could also just be accusative because it's the object of fecisse. It is, of course, being described by this relative clause, which I might just bracket off there, the verb, fecere it, but the editor's punctuation tells me logically it's going to make sense to include de plus the ablative, and there's a genitive with it. Out, ablative, out, ablative. So, and that he had not fekissed that which he fakerited regarding the ablative, either by this or by this. Hey, it's not my fault. Right? I had not done, or he, like, this is, Ambiorix was saying or spoke or said that he had not fekissed that which he fakerited, de oppugnatione castrorum, either judicia or voluntate sua, but by this. So he hadn't done it either by judicia or by voluntate sua, but by the coactu, and then you put that genitive with it of the civitas, right? Suaque looks like an accusative, and esse is an infinitive. And eius modi, genitive, will put it with the sua imperia, again, an accusative and an infinitive. And that sua imperia, his own imperia, were kind of like of the sort. That must be a result clause, of the sort that non minus haberet iuris in se multitudo, quam ipse in multitudinem. That, again, I'm going to go from ut through typically a subjunctive verb, but my editor told me to go through here. Non minus. This must be my subject and my verb. And minus likes to take the genitive, but minus is my object. So that he had, or sorry, I do have a subject. The subject is multitudo. That the multitudo subject had non minus iuris over him than he himself had over the multitudinem. Civitati looks dative. Moreover, furthermore. Hanc looks accusative, looks like it's going with causam. And I'm going to put the genitive with causam. And then fuisse looks like my infinitive, so this is another, continuing the indirect statement. Furthermore, that this had fuisse the belly causam for the civitas. Probably could be a because, or probably which. No, maybe a because. Let's try it out. We'll go through potuerit. Because I don't see a subject, so this is my subject and verb. He was not able to infinitive resistere, which is a compound verb that takes the dative case, to resistere the object. A repentinae coniurationi, and then you put a genitive in there with it, of gallorum. So because does make sense. So does that. Id se facile ex humilitate sua probare posse. Again, when I have a se, that's probably the subject of my infinitive. This infinitive takes another infinitive, so that he himself, right, but that he was able to probare, to prove id must be my object. Facile, adverb, from his own humilitate. Probably because, again, non adeo se, subjunctive because I'm inside of a what's it called? Indirect statement. But adeo is also going to set me up for this guy. My adeo sets me up for a result clause, and it goes through a subjunctive verb. So all that's left is, that he was able to probare this, facile, ex humilitate sua, because he was not so imperatus, which takes a genitive, imperatus in things, that he trusts, so that he is not so imperatus in things, that he trusts that he is able, that he trusts that, my new accusative, that this is able, which takes another infinitive, to superari this, suis copiis, or to be superaried by suis copiis, right? That he was not so imperatus rerum that he would think that the populum Romanum was able to be superarid suis copiis.